Jewish law is comprised of 613 commandments, 248 positive commandments, things that God wants us to do, and then there are 365 negative commandments that we are not to do. And together with both of them, it makes up 613 commandments. There's another way of dividing the commandments in a way that it's called Edus, Chukim, and Mishpatim. There are the laws in the Torah between man to man that are logical, ethical commandments, and many of them perhaps we would figure out on our own that this is the best way to lead our lives. Those laws are called Mishpatim. The second category of mitzvot are the mitzvahs that we do that say testimony that God is the creator, like the mitzvah of Shabbat, with the purpose of observing the Shabbat is to remember that God is the one who created the world and constantly creates the world. And then there are mitzvahs like sitting in a sukkah that says testimony that God took us out of Egypt and He protected us with special clouds from heat while we were in the desert. And then there are mitzvahs like eating matzah on Pesach, on Passover, which again represents to remember that we were slaves in Egypt, and then God took us out of Egypt, and we were rushed, so we didn't have time to make leavened bread, and therefore we eat matzah to remember that God took us out of Egypt. Those mitzvahs are called edus. They say testimony that God is running the world and creating the world. These are mitzvahs that we would not on our own ever come up with commandments like that, but after God gave us the commandments, we could relate to it that these mitzvahs are to remember and to testify about many miracles that happened in the past. The third category of mitzvot are called chukim, decrees that we have no idea why and what the meaning is behind it. For instance, that God told us that we cannot eat meat and milk together. Why kosher meat separately is okay, milk is okay, but when they are together, they're not okay. Not only aren't we allowed to eat it, we're not allowed to even cook it, we're not allowed to derive any benefit from it. This is a command beyond reason. The same way we learned that Jews are forbidden to wear a garment that is made out of wool and linen. Wool alone is perfectly alright, linen alone is perfectly alright. However, wool and linen sewed together, woven together, is forbidden. Why can we wear a garment that is made out of wool and linen is beyond our comprehension. It is called a chok, a decree beyond rationale. And there are many mitzvahs in the Torah, the laws of purity and impurity, what is considered impure, what is considered pure. Hundreds of those commandments is something that we have no understanding, because obviously we're talking about a spiritual concept that we have no idea what is impurity and how it becomes pure again. Those commandments are called chukim. One would think on the first glance that the Torah is, as we mentioned, made up of 613 commandments, and they have different approaches. Some have reason, some are testimony, and some are decrees. But the truth may be said that all commandments originate from God Himself. And God Himself, when He commands us to do something, it is based on God Himself, who is not limited to reason. God is not based on reason. God created a system of reason, of rationale, but He does not follow the laws that He Himself created, the laws of rationale. In other words, anything that comes from God, which all of the commandments originate from God, it originated from God the way He is on His own, before, beyond His creation of rationale. God cannot want something based on something when what it's based on is in itself a creation. Rationale is a creation that God gave us, a tool to use with our mind. We use the system of rationale. But God, who is the creator of everything, not only the world in general, and not only He created time and He created space, and therefore He has to be beyond time and beyond space, the same way God really also created a system of logic. And He cannot be limited to the system of logic when He had to create the system of logic too. So any commandment, going back to its essence, every commandment is really a chok. It is a law without beyond reason. And we are to understand that the mitzvahs that God gives reason is not to say that that was the cause of why God commanded us to do anything, because God can't be based on reason. So the reason that the Torah itself gives is not to be understood that that was the basis of the commandment, but rather once God willed it, and He chose to will that commandment, He also found reason too. Reason came after He willed it. It is almost like to say a parent who loves their child and loves them so dearly based just on the fact that it's their child. But later they find reason too. My child is so kind, he's so considerate, he's so bright. But we understand that the love that parents have to children are not based on any of those things that they themselves say to their friends. It's based on the children are of the same essence. So reason comes later, after you have an attachment that is beyond reason, beyond rationale. And the same way goes with God. Every commandment in the Torah is a chok. In matter of fact, one of the classical mitzvot that are called chok is the mitzvah of the red heifer. In Jewish law, in order to become pure, after someone comes in contact with a dead person or goes to a cemetery, the only way to become pure again is when Mashiach will come, and this is what was practiced when we had the first and second Holy Temple, that a red cow that was 100% red had to be slaughtered and later burnt, and with the ashes of the red heifer and a combination of some other things, it had to be sprinkled to the person who came in contact with a corpse, and by in a certain way being sprinkled, and that's how the person would become pure again. At the same time, we have no understanding of how a red heifer does that. There's so many things about